I gotta say, this game really did surprise me with just how good it ended up being. Yo, what's good? It's Miss Stora. So, Dead Island 2 was announced what feels like forever ago. And to be honest, I didn't expect this game to be anything special because of just how long it spent in development, right? I thought we had another Duke Nukem Forever situation on our hands. But what actually ended up happening is during its over 10 years of full development is that the game ended up switching devs a few times, eventually landing with Dambuster Studios, who we actually have to thank for the game finally releasing. Now, given all that, right? I really would have been happy if Dead Island 2 just ended up being average, right? I would have been cool with that, but it didn't. It's actually pretty damn good, in my opinion, all things considered, which I'll go into more detail on exactly why in a bit. Real quick though, what's even more impressive is that Dambuster's time with the game actually amounted to 3 years out of the overall like 10, 11, whatever years it was. So it's actually even more impressive, as according to them, almost everything was scrapped from previous builds of the game, save like the location, it being set in LA. So mad impressive and a lot of props to them. So with my opening thoughts kind of out of the way, let's just get into a few of the details on what made Dead Island 2 enjoyable to me personally, right? Keep in mind that I played this thing on PS5, so my opinions are gonna account for that, right? I didn't see too much buzz though on a bad PC port for this game, so I think it ended up all right on PC as well, right? First of all, let's set the record straight in that this game doesn't take itself too seriously, and that shines through in pretty much all aspects of the game, which is most apparent in combat. It's goofy, arcadey, not grounded in realism at all. It's gory, and most importantly, it's just fun as hell, right? Taking out zombies, whether it's with melee weapons, consumables, which, I really love how they executed in this game, by the way. They're on a recharge system instead of actually managing a limited supply of consumables, but I digress. Or with ranged weapons, like thrown weapons or guns, right? It's just so much damn fun overall. And honestly, throughout the entire playthrough, I didn't get bored at all of the combat. The different weapon types keep things varied, and I found myself using pretty much every type of weapon that's on offer here. My favorite weapons personally were the ones that were one-handed light weapons like machetes, being able to swing really fast and deal with a lot of different situations at least okay, right? The problem is that those kinds of weapons are all rounders, and in situations where you're like surrounded by zombies, you're really gonna need a two-handed big weapon that can hit multiple zombies with each swing, like a large katana, a bat, a golf club, or a sledgehammer or something like that, right? And then in melee as well, you also got fist weapons like brass knuckles or claws that just strike insanely fast and are great at taking out single targets really quick, even if they do have a lot of health, as well as being great at applying status debuffs, which are key in combat as well. Combine this with the durability system, which typically I hate in pretty much most games. I can't stand durability systems typically, but here it's executed really well since you can repair your weapons, but the durability is tuned enough to where you can almost rely on a single weapon solely if that's what you want to do. So if you have a favorite weapon, you will get to use it very, very often, but its durability probably is going to get really low in between workbenches, which is where you can repair your weapons at. So you are probably going to switch to a different weapon, even if towards the end of your runs in between workbenches, like I said. But still, like I said, you can still use your favorite weapon like most of the time if that's what you want to do. All of this lends to, like I said, combat just never getting boring, as you can combine the weapon the weapon variants that the game, I would say, gently nudges you into, as opposed to something like Breath of the Wild, which just forces weapon variety down your throat. You can combine the weapon variety here with all the different skill cards and abilities that your Slayer could do, and so things will always end up staying fresh. And that's without even mentioning things like the weapon mod system, so that your any two weapons are rarely gonna be exactly like. Some of these mods have elemental abilities or like bleed effects or what have you. Some just deal more melee, like general physical damage type, and then on top of that, later in the game, ranged like guns get tossed into the mix. At that point, combat is going to have like a nice ebb and flow to it of taking out targets in melee and then whipping out a gun to pop a few shots of like a rifle or pistol to thin out a bit of an incoming horde, or to take out like an apex or special infected in a horde that's coming at you, leaving you to deal with just the regular zombies. There's a lot of expression and fun to be had here with the combat system and how you can really tackle combat and do things the way that you find best or the way that you want to. And it's easily one of the biggest reasons that this game left such a good impression on me. And what's really cool is if you don't want to get too deep into it, you don't have to. You can just kind of slap mods onto weapons haphazardly and just enjoy the game kind of as like just a turn your brain off zombie killing action adventure. If you want to do that, you can. Sure, you'll be less effective and you are going to miss out on some of the expression and fun that this game kind of allows you to experience in combat. But if that's how you want to play, or that's how you find the game most enjoyable, it's an option. And I think it's really dope that the devs were able to execute this system in that way. Next, I want to talk about overall appearance and like everything related to it, right? Like graphically, damn, does this game look good? Like, it actually caught me off guard. For a game about killing zombies, there's a lot of vibrancy and pop to your surroundings. Yeah, it's a game about fighting undead, but it isn't gloomy. There's a lot of color all around in areas that it makes sense, and it keeps things interesting on the eyes for longer play sessions, right? The same extends to the locales, which honestly is so fun, right? Yeah, you got normal real life places like, Bel Air and Venice Beach, but they have a lot of character here in this game, right? Bel Air has a lot of tight streets and alleyways, making all the fighting that you do there feel really claustrophobic, which is a nice touch considering that it's the opening area of the game. It makes even small packs of zombies feel like big threats, which is critical for the early game, right? Venice Beach is just awesome as well. It's this really dope playground of a hub. It's really colorful, but it's also got like a few twists and turns and, a lot of novel areas like an outdoor gym, right? Also, while nowhere near Dying Light 2 levels, I did get a small bit of a, that parkour feel in this area, as there's a few different roofs that you can hop back and forth to. And, that's not all either. My favorite personal level was the movie studios level. That level was so dope. It's just full of all these different like wacky movie sets, some of them parodying like a bunch of different real life movies, and you can do crazy stuff in there like press buttons on FX setups, for example, and drop lights from the rigs above onto zombies, and it was just mad fun, just tons of chaotic fun. Also, some of the locales like the sewers were genuinely scary for me as well. Like, I don't know why, like I was pretty strong throughout the entire playthrough of this game, as I always did various side quests, so there was never a point where like fear came from not being strong enough to take out any of the zombies. But the darkness and just guttural sounds of the infected in certain areas, like the sewer areas, just gave me the creeps. I was just genuinely scared in some of these areas. All of this to say that from a graphical fidelity standpoint as well, it looks solid too. Textures are really well detailed, with obviously a lot of work being put into them and surrounding elements of graphical fidelity, right? As a side note to the visuals, I'm glad that with so many games coming out running like crap on both console and PC, that it's nice that the performance here is just smooth as hell. It's honestly kind of sad to say that in 2023, you got to give a game props for just, running properly, but given a 3-year dev time and dealing with tons of fan anticipation for a game being announced so long ago, I'm gonna go ahead and give Dambuster credit where it's due here for shipping this game in a good state performance wise, at least on PS5, right? I mean, they were able to do what several other high profile devs have just failed to do for some reason this year and in recent years, which is honestly kind of sad. And since I talked a little bit about the locales, I do want to say I don't want to make this seem like I'm just sunshine and rainbows in this game. I'm just saying it's better than I thought it would be. But I will say one negative I had about the game is that it is an open world, like, you know, Dead Island 1 was, right? I do want to iterate that there are some negatives here, right? But I wish this game was an open world. Even if they didn't, you know, if they couldn't find a way to make vehicles work, I still think they could have done an open world and made it work. However, I will say the lack of an open world did lead to them, you know, putting several different semi-open areas to travel between in this game, and them not being completely open. It's obvious here. It allowed the devs to put a lot more love into the details of these areas. So the trade-off has its merits, and it really just comes down to personal preference on what kind of game you like playing more, at least for a zombie game like this, right? Which is weird, as I normally like catered experiences, games like Resident Evil, you know, 4 remake, Resident Evil 2 remake. I'm in my zombie games, I'm not always that big a fan of open world games, but for some reason in Dead Island, it's just, I don't know, it just hits for me, you know. And lastly, I'm gonna go ahead and talk about the story, right? Which from any zombie game, I'm happy if a story can just give me motivation to keep going. You know, it doesn't have to be anything too special. Games like Daymare 1998 and Heaven Dust 2 comes to mind in that regard. Nonetheless, I'm of course really pleased when zombie games do put in that effort to make story something special and packed with interesting lore, like plenty of the Resident Evil games. Like those come to mind in that regard, right? Like, there's a reason that the Resident Evil games is one of my favorite gaming franchises of all time, and the reason I'm such a big survival horror fan, in part because of the story and lore that it sets up for its universe, right? For Dead Island 2, its story falls somewhere in the middle of those two ends, right? I'd say like above average for sure. If we were giving just the story rating, I would give it something like a 7.5, but even up to like an 8 at certain points. It's filled with good humor and just tons of charm throughout the whole thing. I wouldn't say I outright laughed at any point, I don't think, but it did get a lot of chuckling out of me, right? Got a lot of good little chuckles and laughs out of me, right? And, you know, not even just the story beats, but in general voice lines, small character interactions that weren't even pertinent to the story. And, you know, over time, just the lore and narrative it sets up, started to get me more interested as things went on. I will say, execution wise, some of the cooler elements of the story aren't implemented the best or like fleshed out enough, perhaps to be shown later like as DLC or something, or like in a sequel. I'm not sure. Like, come on, right? If you're gonna put a bunch of cool stuff in your narrative, serve up a good portion of it. You know what I'm saying? We rationing around here. I like string beans. Come on. Like, if you're going to put cool stuff in your story, give me a good chunk of it. You don't got to show all your cards, but give me something, right? You know, nonetheless, I did find what was here really enjoyable, with a few moments that did legitimately make me go like, oh shit, at some of the twists that were presented in the plot, you know, that the plot threw at me. I was like, oh damn, like I wasn't expecting some of the stuff to happen that did end up happening. Overall, it was really solid, right? The story does end though with things not being wrapped up completely, but honestly, I don't mind, as I'm way more interested in the story of and lore of what's going on than I thought I would be. So if it, you know, the cliffhanger that's set up here, it's all good. It's all good if the dev can deliver on what's to come. If so, all's going to be forgiven. Everything's going to be straight. All right. And yeah, you know, they're just got a few sections to go over here, and those are going to be my overall thoughts and explanations on why Dead Island 2 did end up surprising me the way that it did, right? For some fans of the series, I'm sure what was delivered here is never going to be enough for them, as, you know, when a game has been worked on for over 10 years across several different studios, so for some people, expectations, they just can't help it. Expectations are just going to be unrealistically high, right? Like, for when it eventually does release, like, damn, they were cooking this thing for so long, I'm sure it's going to turn out mind-blowing. And some people just can't help but look at games that end up in development hell that way. But for me, my expectations were pretty low, which led to me being pleasantly surprised by how the game ended up turning out, right? I can honestly say though, even if someone didn't approach the game with the same, I guess you say, expectation mindset that I did, you know, they kind of, let's say they just went into the game neutral, like just plain up neutral, right? That they would still be in for a really good time, to be honest. I can feel pretty confident saying that, right? It isn't going to win any Game of the Year awards. I'm almost sure of that. But I think most people can agree that it is a worthy successor to the much beloved Dead Island 1. I think that's kind of the main draw here, the biggest point of all this. And overall, it's just a good game. An amazing game? I don't know. I don't think so. But I would say a good game, maybe even a damn good game, but I don't know about like amazing, but it is a really good game, right? I also, you know, think that most fans of the series will just be glad that this game didn't end up being a tragedy, you know, as a result of its development hell, like so many unfortunate games that have come before it. I think that in of itself is a cause for celebration. It serves as a great reminder that when things in game development are approached with love and care, that even games in development hell can turn out to be great, and that stigma doesn't need to be attached, or it doesn't necessarily need to be true for games that do end up with those really long development times as a result of unfortunate circumstances, right? And I think that's a celebration that we can all, well, I guess, celebrate for the gaming industry, right? So that's going to do it for today's video, y'all. I'm sorry it's been a while since my last one. I've been pretty busy. But yeah, let me know what you thought of Dead Island 2 if you've played it. Be sure to comment below and let me know what you thought of this thing overall. Also, if you found this video enjoyable, please feel free to like it if you did, and subscribe if you haven't already. My name is Minstora. I'm going to catch you on the next one, and y'all be easy, man. Peace.